as we go from day to day.
Lord, I come before you with contrite heart. Humbly I surrender all that I am. I want to learn from you. Please draw me close to you. Help me share your love and grace in all I do. Lord, I come before you with contrite heart. Humbly I surrender all that I am. I want to learn from you. Please draw me close to you. Let me share your love and grace in all I do. Oh Lord, transform me. Change my heart completely to be more like you. Oh Lord, renew me. Heal my mind and broken heart today. I want to be and to do what you commanded, and be filled with the Spirit every day. I want to serve you wherever you may lead me. I want to serve you till the very end. Oh Lord, transform me. Change my heart completely to be more like you. Oh Lord, renew me. Heal my mind and broken heart today. I want to be and to do what you commanded, and be filled with the Spirit every day. I want to serve you wherever you may lead me. I want to serve you till the very end. Help me shine a light to a darkened world, and always live your truth in every way. May your love for me be seen by everyone, and lead others to trust and love you more. Oh Lord, transform me. Change my heart completely to be more like you. Oh Lord, renew me. Heal my mind and broken heart today. I want to be and to do what you command.
Good afternoon to all our viewers and listeners, to all our members, our friends, locally and in the diaspora. We welcome you. I welcome you to this forum as we discuss a very important and relevant topic: how to stretch your dollar in these Covidious times. I also extend welcome to our able and capable panelists. And at this time, it's a great privilege to introduce the members of the panel. So today we have with us Brother Anselm Joseph.
Good afternoon, everyone.
He currently serves as treasurer of the Grenada Conference of Seventh-day Adventists. Then we have a gentleman who hails from the Helen of the West, Brother Gilbert Francois. He's currently the former VP Finance of the then Caribbean Union College, former auditor of the Inter-American Division, former treasurer, East Caribbean Conference. He's also the founder and owner of Gamma Learning Institute, an accountant, financial advisor, and an author. So he's a man with a wealth of experience. Then we have Sister Londa Shears Davidson. She's a church auditor, one of the church auditors at Subi's Seventh-day Adventist Church. And by no means least, we have the capable Brother Devon George. He's a retired teacher and farmer. Just before we go into the discussion, I just want to say that COVID-19 has taught and continues to teach us many lessons that we need to prepare for the expected and the unexpected. And that also includes managing our finances. COVID-19 has also created not only a health issue, but many financial challenges for individuals, families, churches, governments, and the global community. And so this forum is designed to empower you, our listeners, to manage your finances, however little it may be, so that in Covidious times like these and thereafter, you can survive. It is designed to enable and give hope to those persons who have lost jobs or income to be able to plan for the now and the future. Remember, the Bible says that we can occupy till he comes. But even as we occupy, we need to ensure that we are ready for the second coming of Jesus. So you can post your questions and comments so that they can be acknowledged and addressed. So we'll go straight into the discussion, and I believe that we'll all have a wonderful time as we discuss this very, very relevant topic. So my first question to the panelists, not targeting anyone, but they can answer the question: how has COVID-19 negatively impacted the global economy? What are some of the challenges do we expect to face in the near future as forecasted by many persons? Many of our scientists and health experts and economists, they have forecasted that there will be some negative impact in our global economy because of COVID-19. So how has it negatively impacted the global economy? We can also look at it locally, and what are some of the challenges do we here, even in Grenada, expect to face in the near future?
Thanks, sir.
I think one of the challenges of COVID-19 is that it has exposed businesses that have weak immune systems. I think that's one of a very big challenge for COVID-19. I think it's also going to cause recession. The governor of the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank thinks that we will have at least 2 years of recession. So these are some of the challenges that I think that COVID-19 has done.
If I may come in here, another negative impact of the COVID-19 pandemic is, as the World Trade Organization has said, that they expect trade volumes to decline by 13 and 30 to 32% in 2020. Now, the global economy, let me just interject here. The global economy is the economic interdependence that is established between countries, right, in terms of trade. And that trade volume is expected to drop between 13 to 32% in 2020. Now, we also see that the tourism and tourism-related sectors have been severely impacted. Lots of persons have been sent home. And so I think we can conclude that the COVID-19 pandemic has affected all facets of life.
All right, very well.
The biggest tragedy for COVID-19 would be if we don't learn lessons. I think that would be the biggest tragedy. There's lessons for businesses to learn, that they must have a business continuity plan. So we need a plan that makes provision for contingencies before. There's a lesson for families that we must have emergency funds, that we need to save for a rainy day. And the other big lesson for us is food security. Our sister Londa said that there will be challenges with trade. So if we expect our food to be imported, we could have some challenges as well. So those are 3 lessons that we need to take away from COVID-19. 1, business continuity for businesses. Every business needs to sit down and say, what if? And come up with contingency plans. Every family needs to put in place emergency funds. And as a country, as a community, we need to put aside, we need to consider food security, so that going forward, we could have those things in place if we should have another emergency.
All right, I think it's well said. So based on what you're saying here, that there must be some continuity plan. And you will hear many of our government officials and even we ourselves, we were not really prepared for this pandemic that we now face. And you are saying here that we need to have business continuity plans. We need to have emergency funds just in case something pops up again. And also look at food security. And I believe that's why we have the Brother Devon George here, who is a farmer. He will be able to give us some guidance in relation to how we can stretch our dollar, even in that direction. So I don't know if any one of you have anything else to say on this.
Yep, Pastor Guillaume, if I could pop in here. Also, countries that base the economy mostly on things like tourism, as in some of the small island states in the OECS Caribbean area, they will have a greater struggle to recover. Yes. In that not only the tourists have been impacted negatively by the economic crisis, in that the finances are affected, but they need to have confidence again to travel. I mean, no one wants to get stranded on a cruise ship, or stranded when you travel to another country that something occur and you get stranded there. So I think that in itself is another lesson for us, is that your economy has to be diversified. And I agree with Elder Francois in that we have to stress a lot on food security, because in times like these, we need to ensure that we can feed ourselves. And I recall that some years ago when a Minister of Finance was doing his budget presentation, he said that when America sneezes, we either catch pneumonia. Well, now America has pneumonia. So I don't know what we'll have now. That's my introductory.
All right. So based on what you're saying, the next question in line is, how can our members be prepared? Not just our members, but those of our listeners, those who are listening, how they can be prepared for these economic challenges that are ahead of us. Because from what I'm hearing, it appears as though things may not get better in the near future, so that we all need to be prepared for the hard economic times that may come upon us as a result of COVID-19. So how can we be prepared for these economic challenges? I've heard you say having a contingency plan, emergency fund, you talk about food security, diversion, you said about diversity, economic diversity. So what are some of the other things, practical things that a family can do, or an individual can do to be prepared for these hard economic times that are ahead of us? What can they do?
Sorry, Pastor Gina, before you go into what can we do to be prepared, I just wanted to make two other points, and pardon me here. The second part of the question, of question number one, was what are the challenges we expect to face? And besides job security or job loss and food security, there are 2 or 3 other things I want to mention. One of them being mental health issues.
Yes,
that is a challenge I think that will come about, or that has come about. The other one is social issues like child abuse, domestic abuse, crime, and that sort of thing. And the one I really want to mention here is our children's education, or how they are being educated. Now, we know that we have the EdMiddle program, learning from home. Teachers are to log on and teach the students from home. However, we know that there are a lot of students who have no access to internet, neither do they have computers or so to be able to log on during the day and learn. So I think our children's education will be severely impacted as well, and we need to look into that and see how we can mitigate this. And I want to make one other point before I give the other panelists. We must understand that COVID-19 is still impacting our lives at this time. And right now, we do not know the full extent as to how the pandemic has or will affect us. In other words, the situation is very fluid and it's constantly changing. And so its impact will also change.
Well said, well said.
I want to agree with Sister Davidson. And for me personally, that's my biggest challenge with COVID-19. We don't have a roadmap to navigate it. It's unknown. Nothing has happened like it before. So we can't say this is the way, walking in it, because we don't know. And that's the biggest challenge. So it's like us groping in the dark. We have to take step by step on a daily basis. It's like going into uncharted waters. And for me, that is the biggest challenge with COVID-19.
So what adjustments do you think persons will have to make in order to face those economic challenges?
So, Pas, I think we have had in the past a similar situation to COVID-19, that we can probably borrow from. In that, in 1918, we had the Spanish flu situation. I mean, it was a pandemic that killed over 500,000 people in the United States of America. I think probably what we need to do is to visit that situation and see what parallels there may be for this current situation, and see how we can use information from then to help us navigate through what is difficult times. With education, for example, I just wanted to just say a little something on what Sister Londa said. I got caught up for a little bit, so I didn't quite hear the full extent of what she said about education. But one of the things I think is that whereas we should be really concerned, I think we worry a bit too much. And just today, for example, I had a discussion about the reopening of school being contemplated. And when we start contemplating these things now, and I look at the document that was sent out regarding the reopening of church, the number of things that we really have to get involved in discussing. But I think that we are too worried. I think we're really too worried about our children's education. And I hope that we don't carry this worry to a point where it causes us to make mistakes that it would be very difficult for us to recover from. But for those of us who are so very worried about the situation, I want to point us to 1 Peter 5:7. Casting all your cares upon him, for he careth for you. I think we have to, first of all, find solace in the Word of God and turn to God in a situation like this. And then we need to contemplate a number of changes to deal with the situation as you ask, in terms of how it is we could go forward. So I think there are a number of changes that we need to contemplate, and it may be very difficult for many of us in terms of the changes that we may need to make. But I want to also point us to Philippians 4:13. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. So in coming to have to make the changes that we need to make, we need to focus on Philippians 4:13. And we can do all things, all the good and positive things through Christ who strengthens us. And I want to submit that probably what we need to do is to look at our daily lives, look at what we do generally from the time we rise up in the morning to the time we go back to bed, and look to see how each thing we do on a daily basis can be changed or can be tweaked in whatever way so that we can spend less to do it. And I just want to mention one thing in particular, perhaps the way we eat. I've listened to a number of people talking about how difficult it is for them at this time because they're getting fat because they're eating so much. No, that for some people, while some people are grappling with the fact that they don't have enough. So one of the things that we need to contemplate is just how much we eat. And that perhaps at this time, some of us may need to look carefully to see if we actually need to eat 3 meals a day, or if we need to eat 2 meals a day instead of eating 3. And also, it's about really contemplating and really disciplining ourselves, because a lot of us eat 3 meals a day. In fact, sometimes we eat what could be considered to be 4 and 5 meals, because we eat those 3 main meals and then we snack a lot between the meals. So those are things that we need to really consider. And if you look at it, some of us may be able to save quite a bit of money from eating 2 meals and not undernourishing ourselves, or eating 3 meals and not snacking and not drinking a lot of the things that we do between our meals. So just this one thing I want to throw out, for example, immediately, as an immediate thing that we look at and contemplate how we could stretch the dollar. There are a number of other things that I'll raise eventually, but this one thing, for example, I think is something of significance.
So based on what you're saying, you're speaking here about conservation. So even as we eat to conserve how we eat. But it doesn't always involve eating, but it can involve other aspects. So in terms of electricity, we should be able to conserve electricity, conserve water. Is that what we are saying here?
Well, that's part of what I'm saying. And I looked at this thing and I thought back to when I was a little boy, and the fact that we didn't earn much. My parents didn't earn very much. I always lived in a large family, 10 people and more. And I thought of how we ate. And, we ate from the land, mostly. All right? We did buy stuff, but we mostly ate from the land. And I thought of a lot, not just what we eat, but, okay, let's take a number of things we do on a daily basis. You bathe, you eat, you brush your teeth, you take care of your hygiene. Now, think about it. If you look back, the old people often didn't even use soap, to bathe, but they use citrus, ghost spore, and limes, and so on, which are free and which do a great job. One of the best deodorants you could get actually is lemon, right? And there's scientific proof of how it works in nature. That's one of the best deodorants you could use. So if you think about bathing with citrus, you cut out money if you have limes and ghost spores and so on. Then if you think of how back in the day people brush their teeth, right? And some people may have experienced that perhaps in the crisis of 73, 74. People brush their teeth with salt, coconut oil, wood ash, and then the ladies and men also took care of their hair by using hibiscus bush and cochineal and aloe. And if we do these things now, if we move back to doing these things now, we'll be moving back closer to nature. Think about the money that we will save. Think about how far our dollar then would be able to stretch, So these are things I think we need to contemplate how our parents, for those of us who are a bit older, and how our grandparents, our great-grandparents lived just a few short years ago.
All right. So you're talking about going back to basics.
Going back to basics.
Want to share? All right. So here we are in a new normal, and we have to prepare for the new normal. Now, we must bear in mind that there are some things that we can change, as Brother George rightly said. There are some things that we can do to adjust, but there are some things that we cannot change. And trying to change it will only stress us out. So making the necessary adjustment, simple adjustment to be able to cope with this new normal, and not just to cope with the new normal, but how we can stretch our dollar. We have to sit down and look at ways and means whereby we can do this. But there are some persons, while they, as Brother George rightly mentioned, while they are some persons who might be eating and drinking, there are those who have lost their jobs, they have lost income, they are struggling, they are wondering where they can get another meal. What advice do you have to give to those persons who might be struggling?
For people who may have lost their jobs and who may be struggling and not able at this point in time to see our next paycheck in a hurry. No, we have to survive, we have to live. And one of the things I suggest is that we have to start getting creative. Let's look around and see what strengths we have, what resources there is that we have that perhaps we can use to get an income. And if not just get an income, not just only get an income, because we may be able to start something, and sometimes things start small and we may not be able to get such a big income at the get-go. But if we start something, then what else can we do to help ourselves? And one of the things I would like to suggest is that people contemplate starting a little garden. Now, many of us may have a little plot of land. Some may not have that plot of land, but we can grow simple things in pots and buckets and other containers, boxes, wooden boxes. Or we might have enough space that we could build a branca, and put in our pen manure and so on in it and grow a crop of something. One, that could help to bring a little income, and also that could help to put food on the table. I tell you something, my wife's aunt brought some beans to us about 3 weeks ago, about 4 weeks ago. And my little daughter took took 3 bean seeds that was kind of mature, and she stuck it in a bucket outside. That beans is growing now so very quickly. And as a matter of fact, yesterday, we started seeing some little flowers. So, just from 3 little beans, in a couple more weeks, we'll have some beans to eat, right? And so I'm saying people could use those kinds of methods to start plant a little garden. If you have enough space that you could plant things that would call for more space, like sweet potatoes and so on, which are excellent food, that is wonderful. If you have the space, you could determine, think carefully about what best you could use. You could plant and you do that. If you don't have much space, like I said, you could do a little branca, or you could do a box. You could you grow lettuce, pak choy, kale, and all those things in pots, and it can make a difference, because then already you have a depleted income or no income, right? They may be able to give you an income, and even if those things in your garden can't give you an income, you can put food on the table. And you do that. My other suggestion is that you encourage friends, you encourage family members, you encourage brothers and sisters at the church to do similarly, and we can share. We could barter. So I might be able to get a hand of bananas from you this week, but I might be able to give you a cabbage. So that way, we're not doing it just on our own strength. We're not doing it on our own, but we partner with our family, with our friends. We partner with the brethren at the church. And that way, we could eat. Where do you get planting material? A neighbor might give you something, a friend, a brethren. But even when you use things like your onions, you cut the bottom of the onion out, probably about 1/4 inch above the root level. If you put that in the soil, it will grow. If you get a bean seed, like you get things like seasonings. Often your side is a very easy grow, and seasonings we use a lot in Grenada, so that is something that and it is always in good demand, I find. So those are the things that people can do, and get creative. So we could start little businesses there, and I'm sure if we discuss with our colleagues, if we start discussions, we will be able to come up with other unique ways which we may be able to start offering some kind of service that we could get an income.
Very well said. Well said. Anybody else want to give an input into this?
Yes, I want to agree with Brother George with doing a skills inventory. We could also look at our hobbies. We have some hobbies that we could convert into cash. We might be able to cook well, we might be able to bake well, We might be able to convert some of those into cash. The other thing we could do is look around the house and see what are we not using that we might be able to sell and convert into cash as well. So these are some of the things we could do in the meantime.
All right.
But most importantly, I think we need to fix our minds. We need to have that mindset that we're not going to roll over and die, that we will persist, we'll keep moving forward. So we need to work with our minds, and we need to keep praying for the Holy Spirit to guide us and to help us during this period.
Amen.
We have a comment here from one of our viewers on YouTube, and I want to acknowledge our viewers there. Someone said, instead of showering, use a bucket of water to bathe. So they are talking here about conservation. And instead of having a light burning all night, if you're not using it, you can have it, you can take it off. So we have to look at ways and means of conserving. And as you rightly said, Brother George, going back to basics. All right, so these are some of the things. But even as individuals try to make the adjustment, do you think that there's anything that the church can do to assist members to face those economic challenges? Apart from having programs like this and so forth, do you think that there's anything that a church can do? And I'm not speaking specifically about the conference, but it could be the local church. Is there anything that they can do to assist members to face those economic challenges that we speak of?
Pastor Guillaume, again, I'm sorry to be the one to sort of put the brakes on us moving forward to the next question. But I want to just go back to how can our members be prepared for these economic challenges. I want to underscore very strongly the submissions made by the other panelists in that of evaluating your situation and resources and making a plan. Actively looking for opportunities and also depending on Christ. But when I looked at that question, I got down to some basic things, and I want to submit them very quickly before we move forward. I want to submit that we should, first of all, don't panic, and it has to do with our mindset, because when we panic, we cannot think straight and we do not make wise decisions, and it blinds what opportunities we can see. So that is going off of Brother Francois' point. I want to also submit that we prepare a budget and stick to it. No matter the little resource that we have, whatever it is, we need to prepare a budget and stick to it carefully and prayerfully. We need to make wise decisions, and we need to set our priorities straight. We need to determine what our priorities are and make sure we have them straight. I also want to just go off of Brother Francis' point in terms of a contingency plan, because not only dealing with this situation, but going forward. So if there's another one, how do we deal with it? And there is a guide that I have personally followed, I've been trying to follow for a while now, and I call it the 40-30-20-10 plan. And I'll briefly explain that. Looking at in terms of your income, your salary, your income, whatever it is, 40, you break it up into percentages, 40%, 30%, 20%, and 10%. Now, 40% should be left for your liabilities, whatever loans you have, to pay for, to take care of that. 30% is for your expenses. That includes things like insurance and NIS payments, your food bill, your utility bills, all of that go into that 30%. And I want to interject here. It is said that if your expenses exceed that 30% of your income, you are living outside of your means. Now, the 20% is for emergencies, and that is what Brother Francois alluded to before. You need to have an emergency plan, an emergency fund put aside, so that in case of emergency, you have that there. And 10% is for savings. So quickly, I just wanted to put that out there. Another thing I would advise persons to do is to write down your expenses. I know a lot of persons, and it is the same as budgeting. But when we think about budget, we think about the reoccurring expenses that happens month to month. But if we write down everything that we spend, it would give us a good overview of what we spend, how we spend it, and we'll be able to easier make changes as we go along. I want to appeal here to our young people, our teenagers, young adults, and even our older ones. Another thing I think we need to do in this time is to be informed and stay informed about our local authority regulations. Now is not the time to be arrested and to pay fines, police fines, whatever little money that we have. Okay? If the curfew is at 7 o'clock, you need to be in your home by 7 p.m. in the afternoon. Be home by 7 p.m. in the afternoon. Okay? Yeah. We need to pay attention to that. Another thing, I think that one more before I let other panelists go on, we need to educate our children and get them involved in the conservation and in the plan of what we're doing. A lot of times we try to shield our children because we don't want them to feel the effects. We want them to be as comfortable as possible. But I want to submit that we speak to our children, speak with them, hold discussions with them, include them in the planning, and let them understand what we're doing, what your plan is, and why you're doing it. And that will help them to understand and to deal with situations that may occur in the future when they themselves become adults.
Well said, sister. Well said. If no other contribution, so the question remains, while we as individuals, we prepare, we try to make the adjustment, the changes, all that was said. Do you think that the church has a part to play? Or is there anything that the church can do to help members to be prepared for those hard economic times? I heard Brother Devon would have mentioned, he went, just slightly onto those areas about, touching base with members, battering with members and, and so forth. But is there any other thing that you think that the church can do to help or prepare our members and even our communities to face those economic challenges that we speak of?
I think.
Well,
okay.
You go.
Okay. I think one of the things that our churches could do is to start a welfare fund. I think that is important. I think paying a light bill for a member who's lost their job would be a strong way of sending out the message that we care. So I think that's one of the things that we need to do in addition to staying in touch. I think something else we need to do is training. Like Brother George could do training in home gardening. Maybe we could do a Zoom meeting like this one so that the members could join in maybe once a week, teach them how to do composting, teach them how to grow a head of lettuce. So those who don't know could get to know. I think that's something we could do. Sister Davidson could do some money management and budgeting Zoom meetings for the members so that they could understand how better to manage their budgets. I think we could do some resume writing and some interviewing skills workshops for them right here on Zoom so that post-Zoom, post-COVID, they will be ready to go out there and write a resume and get a job. And the other thing we could do is to have conversations on entrepreneurship skills, teach them how to look for problems because businesses starts by solving problems. So I think these are some of the areas that the local church could do, could look at. And not even the conference doesn't have to do that. Each local church could do that for its members and its community.
Well said, Francois. I like those ideas.
Yes, I'd like to endorse the ideas raised by Brother Francois. And of course, I think training in a number of other areas. But I think one of the things that we should do is to meet with our members and help members to identify skill and talent that is available among the membership. See how we can pool skill together, pool talent together, identify what resources that may be available for us to use within the church and without, what may be an offer from government and non-governmental organizations. Because I believe that it is quite possible we may see grant funding for a number of things cropping up within the next few weeks and months. And we have to prepare our members so that we can take advantage of that. Also, I think we need to very carefully consider helping our members set up business ventures and perhaps setting up business ventures as a church organization so we could create self-sufficiency. I think we do have a lot of skill, a lot of talent, a lot of resources that we can build good businesses with members, working with members, offering services to members and to the wider community, that we could become self-sufficient and could help us very much in dealing with the current situation at hand. I'm happy that to a certain extent we've come over. Many of us have come over the point of realizing that we are here. God will keep us here, and we now have to consider how it is that we really must survive. And I think as a church, we need to zero in more now on that discussion.
I just want to acknowledge Chair Glenda McLeod from Trinidad. She has tuned into this wonderful program. And I just want to remind our viewers and listeners, if you have any questions or comments, you can feel free to post them. And I can assure you that the panelists, they will answer your questions. We also have Sister Clara Bola here, and I just want to welcome her and acknowledge her presence at this forum. So my next question is now a good time for members or persons who may have investments to cash in on those investments? So for them, it may be kind of rough. They might be struggling. Things might be a little hard with them, and they might, because of the focus of hard economic times, they may think about cashing in their investments. Do you think now is a good time for persons to cash in on their investment? No.
Well, I think that now may be a good time to cash in on investment, depending on the type of investment that you have. I can't really bring to mind immediately what investment that might be good to cash in on now, but it may very well be a good time to consider making new investments. With crisis usually comes opportunities. And again, that is something that perhaps we need to discuss, get advice, good sound advice on what it is that we probably should take on now and what we probably should pull back from. Because, in crisis, I remember, for example, after Hurricane Ivan, a lot of things happened. There were a number of people I know who decided they were no longer going to live in Grenada, that they were going to go to the United States or United Kingdom, and therefore land became available, and land and house became available at prices that was lower than it would have been available for just before the hurricane. And I thought that was a really good opportunity for people to take up at the time. I'm not saying now that this is the opportunity, but we need to consider to look to see if it is an opportunity for things like those. But I certainly think I am thinking that land could be a good opportunity, because if you have land, you can grow your food. And that is one thing that we know people would need continuously. People would need food, So you need somebody who's growing food every day, 3 times a day if you eat 3 meals, twice a day if you eat twice. So that's I'm just thinking, but there are things that we need to look at, and I believe very much in the collective approach, so that we have people in the church who have the skill, who have the expertise, who have the knowledge, and we should use them to help us understand these things better and make kinds of decisions that would serve us well, so that we as individuals could do well, and we can then contribute to the church and the church community in a good way. Also, in terms of land, depending on where you live, it may be very much a good time to consider land, so you could change the location of where you live. I mean, you really maybe in difficulty if you're living in a place where you just can't grow anything. If you have no option at all of growing anything, and it may just serve better if you could move to a place where you could grow, at least grow your own food. So I think whereas it may be a time to cash in on investments, depending on what the investment is that you own now, it may also be a time to make new investments, and that there may be very good opportunity to make good investments at this time.
Very well, very well. Anybody else want to say anything on that?
Yes, first I would like to make a comment on that. I agree 100% with Brother Devon. And I just like to caution a bit that people should not have just rush to make to divest. They have to study the investment properly, and I will advise that they seek expert advice before they making those decisions. Because the worst thing that will happen is that when you make those decisions under pressure, later on you might learn that how disadvantaged you were making that decision. So I will think that you should seek expert advice before you proceeding to divest some of those investments.
So someone has a fixed deposit in a bank, and for them that's an investment, fixed deposit. Because they're facing a little hard economic times, do you think they can just cash in on that fixed deposit? What advice would you give to them? I mean, I heard what you said, Brother Anselm, but there might be persons might just be thinking of what do we know?
Yes, but the thing is, that's why I say everybody will have to assess the situation. Now, if someone lost job and they have no other saving other than the fixed deposit, obviously that person will have to leave somehow. So they might have to cash in. They will consider doing that. Right. But if there is no need, let's say if you have investment in some company or something like this sort, I wouldn't just say, well, you go and you divest and bring in the cash, So every situation you have to study it properly, and I will advise that you get an expert opinion before you make that decision.
Right, very well, very well.
I think Brother Anselm hit the nail on the head. I always think about Jacob and Esau. One teacher of mine referred to Esau as bowl of soup. The man gave up his whole birthright, and he could have just waited a little while longer.
Yes.
So, that is something that I think we have to consider. It might be difficult, but we need to consider carefully, very carefully. Even it might mean waiting a week or 2 more, consider very carefully. And we have experts like Brother Anselm, people like Pastor Isidore, and others, who could give good advice.
Someone says here that the church should donate food hampers, in terms of the church helping donate food hampers to persons in the congregation who are in need. While that is so, how can members save? What methods do you think that members can use to save for rainy days so that they can sustain themselves for a period of time during a period of health crisis like what we are facing now, maybe economic crisis, maybe job loss or a loss of income? I've heard someone say that you should save up to 3 months so that in the event that you meet a crisis like this, you should be able to sustain. You should have enough save to sustain yourself for about 3 months or more. What do you think about that? What advice do you have in relation to that?
Let me butt in here again. I wouldn't put a ceiling as to how much months you will save, but I thought Sister Davidson did a fine job, especially when she was talking about budgeting.
Right.
Now, an important aspect of budgeting, what the ordinary man, most of the ordinary people do usually do, they check the income and the expenses, but they doesn't put aside that dedicated niche, if it's the 10% or the 15% in your savings. And if you do that methodically every month, you might be surprised to how much you might end up with whenever them sort of crises confront you again. So I will go along with what Sister Davidson said. Your savings is a very important aspect of your budgeting, and not only look at the income and the expenditure.
Right. So, Sister Davidson, could you just reiterate the breakdown that you gave us so that in case any person would have missed it, they can get it again?
Yes, I submitted a guide, something that would help you. And I want to, before I reiterate it, I want to say that when you first do this as your guide, your expenditure may not fit into it perfectly, but over time you can work so that it can fit into it as best as you possibly can and work towards that 10% saving. So I call it the 40, 30, 20, 10 plan. So what you do is you break up your income into these percentages. 40% of your income is what you leave aside to pay your debts, your loans, and whatever liabilities that you have. 30% is for your expenses. That includes your food bill, your transportation bill, your NIS payments, your insurance payments. And although insurance payments are annual, you break those up into a monthly, break that down to a monthly expenditure, and you include it there in that 30%. The 20% is for your emergencies. Now, if you do not have an emergency this month, that emergency portion should be left there so that next month, if you have an emergency and next month's 20% is not sufficient to cover the emergency, you can always get from this month's 20%. And then 10% of your income should go towards your savings.
Someone asked a question here. What advice would you give to someone who wants to close their account at a credit union or maybe a bank due to unemployment?
Before we answer this question, Pastor, I want to make one adjustment to Sister Davidson's guide. We say save first. In the book, The Richest Man in Babylon,
Go ahead, Brother Francois.
I was saying before my dog interrupted. In the book, The Richest Man in Babylon, Judge Clayson says, 10% of all I earn is mine to keep. He says, pay yourself first. Most of us will pay everybody else, and we try to save what's left. And my mother always says, if we don't see it, we don't miss it. So if we take off our savings first, and if we take it out through standing orders, if we take it as a salary deduction, we will not even miss it. But once we try to do it at the end, everything else will take priority and savings will become difficult. So we say, save first and make it, as Sister Davidson says, at least 10%.
All right. Someone said that in the plan, sister, someone said that in the plan, tithing was left out.
Oh no, your tithes comes first. We have to ensure that we return our tithes and offering faithfully, and that is the first thing that should come out of our income or salary. If you want to, in terms of where in the plan it should fall, if you don't want to take it out first and then break down the rest of it into the percentage, you can put it in the 30% portion. It can come out there.
All right. So it's not left out.
No, definitely not.
And speaking about tithes and so forth, how can members, we know that we are living in a new normal and we don't have church services as usual, but how can members deposit their tithes and offerings and gifts to the Lord as we face this new normal? Any advice in relation to that?
The moderator, that is one of the biggest challenges that facing the Seventh-day Adventist Church, especially in the Caribbean Union. In some other fields, well, I notice you have it down in your questionnaire with e-banking and so forth.
Yes.
In some other fields, they have online banking, whereby members can just transfer funds using the phone, whatever the device, from their account into the church account. But as I said, the COVID-19 teaches us a lot of lessons.
Yes.
And that is one of them. And most of the fields in the region are still struggling as to how you collect tithes. Well, locally, what I could speak to locally is that we try to open different avenues in that we ask the local district pastors, to organize the church in such a way, small groups and so forth, and that's a way of connecting with the members also. And you could use that to other means of collecting the tithes as well. There are other aspects where members directly deposited to the conference account. Some members deposit directly to the local church account, but then they will have to know the account numbers and so forth. But if you could recall, in the earlier part of the lockdown, even getting to the bank was a problem. So that in itself was an initial problem, how to get it tight. However, the Caribbean Union, through the Caribbean Union, they were exploring the e-banking and paying the tithes online and so forth. And they had a few presentations. We have a training session coming up, I think, on the 27th of this month. And I think that is one of the areas that we will be looking at. And certainly that is one of the areas we'll have to explore in going forward. So next time we confronted with one of the situations as existing now, we have sufficient variations of variety of ways whereby members can access the church to pay the tithe.
Just in case someone is asking why the discussion on tithes and offerings, that's a way of stretching our dollar, because the Bible would have promised us, God himself in Malachi chapter 3, verse 8 to 10, he would have spoken about we should prove him. Yes, here it says, the Lord, see if I will not open the windows of heaven and pour out upon you a blessing that you will not have room enough to receive. So when we return a faithful tithe and offering, it's a means of stretching our dollar, because when we give to God, he will never leave us undone. All right, he will never leave us. He's always faithful. So hence the reason for asking this question. So just in case you have your tithes and offerings and gifts at your homes in this Covidious time, and you really, really want to give it back to the Lord, then there are ways and means, as Brother Anselm Joseph would have mentioned, he would have outlined, ways and means for you to return a faithful tithe and offering to God. Remember, you're not returning it to the church, but that's an obligation that God has given to us. So as I listened to Brother Joseph, he mentioned about e-banking, and the church is seeking to move towards this direction. So are there advantages to e-banking in relation to our discussion? Are there advantages? And I'm not speaking in terms of just returning our tithes and offerings, but are there advantages? Because I've seen persons who have to stand in long lines just to pay their bills or to pay the, whatever. They have to stand in long lines. Do you think that there's some advantage in e-banking?
Pastor Guillaume, yes, there are advantages to electronic banking. Now, electronic banking, the biggest advantage is convenience, as you rightly said. Now, having an ATM card to your account is a form of electronic banking. Now, you can go to the bank at any time, day or night, to the ATM and withdraw cash, right, from the ATM. That's a form of electronic banking. Now, in terms of online banking, where you register and you sign up and so forth, most banks in Grenada do offer electronic banking in that way, where you can sign up all your bills and pay them in the middle of the night if you so choose. And so you can avoid these long lines, standing up, in these long lines and waiting and exposing yourselves unnecessarily as we go out. So the biggest advantage to e-banking is its convenience, where you can do banking in the comfort of your home at any time.
Right. And what's about the churches? Do you think there's any advantages for the church? You seem to speak more on an individual basis, but what's about the church? Do you think it's a wise thing, or COVID has taught us the importance of moving towards e-banking as a church?
But of course, because the advantages or the convenience of e-banking, in terms from a business perspective, of course, the church or the business can conduct transactions the same way at 24 hours whenever they choose to. How is it different from your personalized internet banking? Is it would be set up differently, because in most businesses you have more than one person's requiring to sign to debit your account, and so it is set up differently. So for example, most churches would require 2 signatories to their account, so one person cannot raise a debit to the church account. But it is just convenient, whether it be personal or business-wise.
I have a question here from New York. Someone from New York. They asked, what advice do you give to a single parent with limited means? How can they save 10%, as was mentioned? I think that question goes to you, Sister.
It calls for discipline. We need to know what we want, and so we just have to discipline. We have to make up our minds that this is what we have to do now. Other than that, tomorrow could be worse. I say, if you have a bread, if you used to eat a whole bread, these days you have to eat half. We just need to make it do, and it could get worse if we don't start saving now.
I want to underscore Brother Francois' point. It's all a matter of discipline and your mindset. And we have to learn to make sacrifices. You sacrifice the luxuries today for you to provide for tomorrow. And sometimes when we are in situations we think we need things, but when a crisis happens, we realize that that is only a want, and that can be left out, or it can be cut down, or it can be left out. So we really need to evaluate our spending habits, and evaluate our needs versus our wants. And if we set our minds to it, even though 10% is $1, after 6 months you will have $6. Then that is how we need to think about it.
First, I want to just wait. I just want to weigh in a little bit here. I think that Sister Londa is making a very powerful point. But what she presented was a guide. And if you can't make 10%, start at what you can make. And just another suggestion as to very practically what we could do. Food. I like food. I like to talk about food because we spend oftentimes a lot more money on food than we should. So now we have mangoes in season, and wax apples and so on. So that could form part of our meal. The first part of our meal with our fruits, if we're not having vegetables. And children could help in the family where we make very simple choices. So some children may be accustomed to having, for example, frosted flakes. And now in discussion, realize, well, the oats is better than more nutritious than the frosted flakes, and it is less expensive. So we could save a little dollar there, right? So let's use what is more nutritious and what is less expensive. So we have to look again at what we're doing with food. And there are a lot of other things around the food that we could deal with. And mind you, sometimes we think that little children won't understand, but little children do understand. I can't remember which panelist alluded to that earlier on, that we should let our children know certain things. Little children do understand. My 5-year-old said that she realized now that she must only eat 3 times a day. So school. And maybe that's one very good thing. One of the 2 very good things that we learn from not going to school now, I see a lot of children now being more self-reliant. And then my daughter, I hope when she go back to school, don't want break anymore. She's not having any break now. She decided, well, look, she realized, because we talk about what the situation is and how it affects some other people and might affect some other people worse than us. So probably we could use some of what we have to help other people. And she said, I'm just going to eat only 3 meals a day. I'm not going to eat anything in between. So that's one way, if as parents, if a single parent discuss with the children, it may be, if that is an avenue, it may be possible. They may cut out things with the food. And then sometimes in the type of clothes and shoes and other things that we may just take for granted when we purchase. In those things, it could perhaps make a big difference. So those are very simple things. Sometimes we look for big things, and we fail to look at the very simple things. Right? The old people always used to say one full cocoa basket. So if we deal with those little things, we save the little $1, then it will come up at the end of the month. It could come up to a tidy bit.
All right, well said. Well said. Someone says here, persons who live close to the river can wash and bathe in the river. And I remember, that reminds me of post-Ivan. I remember having to go to the river to wash, something that I never really did in times past, but because of the situation then, because of the crisis, we had to make adjustments and wash in the river. I have a little concern here from someone who says There are times you may want to call upon persons to share based on the focus of the question and the field. Okay, that concern is for me, so it's not really to do with you. So let's proceed. The last question I have here: what are the advantages or disadvantages of the 6 months moratorium? Now, this is something that many of our institutions have done in order for us to stretch our dollar, because some persons, because of their demands and because they would have lost their jobs or lost income, the financial institutions, the banks, and even some of our credit union, they would have seek to institute this 6 months moratorium to meet the needs of their customers. What advice do you have? What advantages or disadvantages are there in relation to that 6 months moratorium? Because there are some persons who may not quite understand this, and they may think, well, yes, I have more money to spend, and they might just spend and spend and spend, but not knowing that at the end of the day, they still have to pay their mortgage or their loan. What advice do you have in relation to that?
Let me pop in here, because as you said, that this is something that is not properly understood by the members. What I would advise, though, if you're on a fixed salary income and your salary is running, I don't think you should accept the moratorium, excepting if you have a cash flow problem. Mm-hmm. Now, the advantage will be to those who are lost their jobs or had their income drastically reduced, in that you have a 6 months grace period. It will assist your cash flow in the short term. But eventually you still have to pay the loan, and it will take you longer to pay off the mortgage. So I would say once somebody's salary is not affected in the crisis, I would think they should continue servicing the loan and don't opt to go for the moratorium.
All right. Any other advice in terms of the advantages and disadvantages of the 6 months moratorium? So you're saying that if you're capable of paying your loan or your mortgage, then you should continue. That's what you're saying, Brother Anselm, Joseph. So is there any other advice that you want to share? Anybody else? Sister Davidson?
Pastor, I agree with Brother Anselm, but I also think that even if your income is not, even if you're not losing income, you need to consider carefully, as with many other things, as with all other things regarding this COVID, we need to consider carefully. I could see a very big advantage for some people, especially small business people like myself. Now, I don't have to pay this mortgage for 6 months. And over 6 months, let's say in 6 months, I might have had to pay $18,000, for example. If my business is of such a nature that I can invest that money over the few months and earn $30,000, say, on $30,000 during that time, and set my business up, that reasonably after that, I will be on a sounder footing, I think is something that should be considered taking. Because that is money that could go into your business. It must be, of course, it must be very well thought out. It must be very well thought out, because you not only have to pay, but the interest will be added on. So you have to consider that. But if you have a business that can be put into a position of advantage based on that, it should be something that I think careful consideration should be given to take. However, the advice from Brother Anselm is very good advice in that the moratorium is not just something that should be just accepted, without very careful study.
I'm agreeing with Brother George that it depends on what you're doing with the money, even though your salary remains level. And he gave a very applicable example of investing it. The other thing, for a family that has no emergency fund, it might do them well to set up that emergency fund. It will cost them the additional interest, but it would give them some level of peace of mind, which might do them well moving forward.
Pastor Guillaume, yes, I would very much like to weigh in here. I underscore the comments made by all or the rest of the panelists, and I strongly agree with them. But I want to take the time to explain what a moratorium is for those persons who may not understand exactly what it is. Now, a moratorium is a legal authorization to debtors or to persons who owe the bank or the institution to postpone payments of their debts for a period of time. All right, so it's a legal authorization that you're given to postpone your payments for a period of time. It does not mean a cancellation of the debt or waiver of interest, as the panelists have said. Now, if you accept a moratorium, the interest will continue to accumulate. At the end of the moratorium period, the accumulated interest is added to your principal amount, and your loan is then recalculated, and you come up with a new monthly payment. You can come up with a longer term to pay your loan. And let me interject here that persons who are close to the age of retirement needs to look at that very carefully, or it can result in both a change in your monthly payment and a change in your loan term, or the time in which your loan will mature, you'd finish pay your loan. So careful thought and consideration needs to be given if you accept or not accept the moratorium as offered, right? People's situations are different, person's situations are different, and so with the different situation or your circumstance, that will help you determine whether or not you should accept or decline the moratorium that is being offered. Of course, my fellow panelists have said some of the advantages, and by explaining, I just gave some of the disadvantages. It may increase your monthly repayment amount, and it may increase your loan term, or it may do both. Okay? Your debt increases at the end of the period because your accumulated interest is added to your principal. Okay? Now, I have also taken the liberty, Pastor, if you'd allow me, to prepare some questions that persons can ask their loan officers. And by the way, my advice would be to persons who are considering accepting or have accepted to call into your financial institution and have a conversation with your banker if you do not understand the terms and conditions and what a moratorium is and how it affects the loan. So some of the questions that you can ask: how does the moratorium affect my loan? Because sometimes we want to ask, but we don't know how to open the conversation or what to ask. How does this moratorium affect my loan? Question number 2, how much interest will accumulate at the end of the period? Question number 3, how much would my total loan be at the end of the moratorium period? And what will be my monthly repayment amount? That right there, and that estimate will give you an idea as to whether or not you can afford to have your loan payment increase, okay? Next question, will my interest rate change? That is a question that you can ask. Also, you can ask what would be the maturity date, or when will I finish pay that loan? What date in the future? And I added one here. If I am unable to make my loan payment at the end of the period, what should I do? So those are some of the questions that I think you can start with your financial institution, your financial provider. You should call in and ask these questions before you decide, or even if you have already decided to take the moratorium, you can still call in and ask your loan officer these questions.
All right, so I have a question here from one of our viewers. Well, it's in the form of a question comment. It says, the moratorium has different aspects. It could be a break in the interest only, or it could be a break on the principal. Is that so?
That is correct, and that depends on your financial institution. Now, some institutions may allow you, or you can offer to pay the interest for the 6 months period. Some may allow you, and even if you accept the moratorium, you can still go into your financial institution and make a payment on your loan. Okay, even if you have accepted the moratorium, you can go into your institution and make a payment on the loan. So yes, the terms, whether it be a waiver of the interest for the period or the principal for the period, it depends on the financial institution, and so you need to have that discussion with your loan officer.
All right. Another comment here, or question. When you are budgeting, saving will be like an expense. And the second one, what advice would you give to the member whose income cannot accommodate this plan? I guess the plan that you spoke about.
Well, savings, an expense, yes, it can be considered as an expense. And as Brother Francois said, and Brother George alluded to earlier, your saving you pay yourself first, right? And if you look at it as an expense, you may want to shift it. Now, Brother George's comment also stands for this question/comment. You may, when you're starting this plan, remember this is just a guide. You may not be able to save 10%, right? But if you can save 2%, you can save 5%, you can save 7%, you start there and you build up to the 10%. And as Brother Francois said, at least 10%, which means if you can go to 15% or 20%, then it's even better for you.
All right. The second comment, question, what advice would you give to when are you budgeting? It says, when are you budgeting, saving will be like an expense. Did you address that question? All right, that was addressed. All right. We are running out of time. We only have about 6 more minutes. I just want to give you, the panelists, an opportunity to make your final comments based on the topic that we are discussing. Is there any final word, any final advice that you want to give to our listeners in relation to how can they stretch their dollar in these Covidious times?
Pastor, I'll go first. Being the only female on the panelists, I will pull this card now. Yes, in conclusion, as we bring this panel discussion to a close, these are unprecedented times, and we must adjust our mindset, our financial habits, and the way in which we go about our daily lives, how we live. Now, there's a quote that I like to say sometimes: to be forewarned is to be forearmed. This means that if you know about something which is going to happen in the future, you can be ready to deal with it. We as Christians, we have been forewarned. We know the Bible teaches, tells us that perilous times shall come in the end. So we know this is going to happen. We need to plan and prepare for it because it is happening as we speak. And there is no better time to start than now. Okay? And I want to leave us with Luke chapter 21, verse 25 to 28. That these signs, their signs will be in the sun, in the moon, and the stars, distress upon the earth and of nations, perplexity. But verse 28 says, when you see these things come to pass, look up, lift up your heads, for your redemption draweth nigh. I just want to encourage everyone to be smart with the decisions that you make, be aware of what is happening around you, and trust in Jesus. He will see us through this difficult time. But most importantly, we need to accept Christ as our Lord and Savior so that He can save us when He comes. Thank you.
Amen, sister. Amen. Amen.
Yes, Pastor. I want to thank you for the opportunity to participate in this discussion. And before I do my conclusion, I just want to remind us that we need to use it up, wear it out, make it do, or do without. And I would like to close with 7 P's.
Could you say that again, Brother Francois? Say it slowly.
Use it up, wear it out, make it do, or do without.
Interesting.
And I want to close with 7 P's. As we go forward, the first P is pray for discernment. The second one is plan for the worst. Plant what we eat. Practice good health habits. Postpone unnecessary spending. Prepare for life to resume. And the 7th P is praise God. Develop an attitude of gratitude. Thank you.
Amen, amen. Well said.
In closing, first, I'd just like to reinforce the point that there were a lot of good pointers as to what members can take, going forward. And I just want to reinforce the fact that members must be aware that this thing wouldn't go away just in a month or two or after church reopen. That will take a long time, probably all next year time. So we'll be struggling under the economic effect of COVID-19. So they need to sit, take a look at the situation and plan, come up with all kind of initiative to enhance the economic condition. So I'd just like to thank you and thank the rest of the panelists and thank the viewing, listening audience for this opportunity.
Amen, amen, Brother Joseph.
So, in closing, I'd like to say thanks for the opportunity as well, and hope that the contribution that we all were able to make would impact well and be very useful. And I just want to say that, remember Philippians 4:13, whatever positive thing we want to do, Philippians 4:13 is a good guide. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. I want to recommend again that we look at what we do on a daily basis, what activities we're involved in from the time we get up to the time we go back down to bed, and see how we can streamline, look back at how our grandparents did it, and see what that we don't do now that we did then, that we had in our meals, like the corn and the bread nut and all those things that some of us still have that we don't need to buy. And maybe eating bread nut as a snack when it could be a meal. Maybe eating corn as a snack when it could be a meal. And, I remember as a little boy, when once a month or so we kill a chicken, is when you got a little piece of chicken. And when you get a little piece of neck with a couple of joints in it, you are very happy. No, I see people eating an entire barbecue leg as a snack and then go home to eat more food and more meat. We need to consider those things. If we're doing good, not just to our body, but if we're doing good to our pocket. So you need to look back at those things, like I said, how we clean our teeth, brushing the teeth with the wood ash or the oil and salt and all those things. So those things I think we need to do. Look at everything that we do and what it is that we can cut out. That is, we could get a better benefit if we do something else that could even be less costly. And whatever we're doing, let us consider if it is a benefit to us that we could share with others. And more pray.
Amen. I want to express my heartfelt thanks to you, the panelists, for sharing your expertise. I do believe that our viewers have been empowered, they have been well educated, they have been informed, and I believe that from now on they will make the necessary adjustments for this new normal. We know that things with this COVID virus will be with us for a while. It has taught us many lessons, and even as we seek to go forward, we must bear in mind that we have to be prepared for the unexpected as well as the expected. We must be able to stretch our dollar. We must be able to save. We must be able to go back to basics. We must be able to conserve. And all of those things that you would have mentioned, the valuable information that you would have given, I hope that our viewers will take it to heart and they will share it with others who are struggling. They don't even know where to turn. Those who have lost jobs and incomes, they themselves would have been empowered by this. And now that we are equipped, we will be able to share with even those persons. I just want to leave a two Bible texts with us that even as we seek to stretch our dollar, while we seek to occupy, while we wait for the second coming of Jesus, the Bible says in Mark chapter 8, verse 36 and verse 37, it says, "What shall it profit a man if he should gain the whole world and lose his own soul? Or what shall a man give in exchange for his soul?" So our sister Davidson rightly said it. She said it well. The best thing that we can do is to give our lives to Jesus Christ, to surrender ourselves. He is more than able and capable enough to sustain us. And even while we seek to earn, even while we seek to stretch our dollar, we know that one of these days, this world will come to an end. And what matters most is our relationship with Jesus. And so even as we seek to save up for Covidious times, we are encouraged by the word of God in Matthew chapter 6, verse 19 to 21. It says, "Lay not up for yourself treasures upon this earth, where moth and rust doth corrupt, and where thieves break through and steal. But lay up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where neither moth nor rust doth corrupt, and where thieves do not break through nor steal. For where your treasure is, there will your heart be also." So while we live in this world, we have to, take care of ourselves. We have to take care of our families. We have to, do whatever we can do. We have to work. We have to earn. But remember, while we do all of this, the most important thing is to save up for eternity. So when Jesus comes again, we all can be saved at last. And so, again, I want to express my thanks to the panelists and to all our viewers. Thank you very much for listening in. And as a stewardship director of the Grenada Conference, I wish you well. I want to encourage you to keep safe, even as we go through these times. And let us remember to observe the protocols and regulations and guidelines that have been given to us so that we can remain healthy and well in Jesus' precious and wonderful name. Once again, thank you, and may God bless you, and goodbye for now.
Lord, I come before you with contrite heart. Humbly I surrender all that I am. I want to learn from you. Please draw me close to you. Help me share your love and grace in all I do. Lord, I come before you with contrite heart. Humbly I surrender all that I am. I want to learn from you. Please draw me close to you. Let me share your love and grace in all I do. Oh Lord, transform me. Change my heart completely to be more like you. Oh Lord, renew me. Heal my mind and broken heart today. I want to be and to do what you commanded, and be filled with the Spirit every day. I want to serve you wherever you may lead me. I want to serve you till the very end. Oh Lord, transform me. Change my heart completely to be more like you. Oh Lord, renew me. Heal my mind and broken heart today. I want to be and to do what you commanded, and be filled with the Spirit every day. I want to serve you wherever you may lead me. I want to serve you till the very end. Help me shine a light to a darkened world, and always live your truth in every way. May your love for me be seen by everyone, and lead others to trust and love you more.